Hi everybody, my name is Callie LaPrade and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the East Texas Food Bank. So a big chunk of my job is going out to different organizations, companies, civic groups, churches, and speaking about the food bank and what we do and what our need is, specifically trying to get funding and new donors for us. So with that being said, I do have some top 5 speaking do's and top 5 speaking don'ts that I've compiled after having done many speaking engagements for the past 2.5 years. Let's start with the speaking do's. So my speaking do number 1 is do start with something that gets your audience interacting with you. Now what I try to do is I'll reintroduce myself when I go up to speak, and then I'll say something along the lines of, so just to take inventory of the room, how many of you guys have heard of the food bank, know about our programs, maybe you've been in to volunteer with us? And then I'll ask them to, by a show of hands, how many of them do this. And they'll go ahead and raise their hands. It kind of gets them interacting with me. And it's more so they can feel comfortable with interacting with me, one, but also it's so I'm not talking at them. They feel like I'm talking with them. And that's important. Speaking point number 2, do fill out your audience and be prepared to adjust your speaking points accordingly. So this is easier, I find, if you're speaking to a smaller group because you may have the opportunity to meet with a bunch of them before you begin your speaking presentation. And so this allows you to kind of gauge maybe where their interests may lie, and you're able then to adjust maybe a client story to tailor it towards that interest, or some of your speaking point facts towards that interest to engage them further. Speaking do number 3 would be do have client stories on hand. Now I know you guys have talked about this already today, and it is really, really important because client stories give hunger a face. Sometimes when you're given a presentation and if people have never experienced hunger or don't know someone who has, hunger seems very distant. And by including a client story, you're really giving hunger a face, and you're really playing on the emotions of the person, which is great because then they feel a further call to help you with whatever your call to action may be at that time. So you really want to have those client stories on hand and have a bunch. So be able to pick and choose which one you want to use and when you want to use it in your presentation, because they are very important to have. Speaking do number 4 would be do bring something for show and tell if applicable. So for me, if I'm going to a specific group that I know love the backpack program, I'm going to go ahead and bring one of our sample backpacks to show them what's in it. This is further, again, engaging your audience, and I also find having show and tell kind of helps ease my nerves because I have something to do with my hands. I can take things out of the pack and show them, and it's just a way to further engage them in that and also pique their interest towards that program even further. So if you do have something like that, if you have a sample senior box, whatever it may be, try to bring something for show and tell if you can. Now, speaking do number 5 would be do expect at least one heckler per speaking engagement. And if you don't have any, that's a happy surprise, but I've found more often than not there's at least one person who may be a heckler or maybe more cynical about food pantries and food banks. And so do be prepared for that and do expect that. When I first started speaking, I would really fear those hecklers, and they kind of rattle me when they started because they'd be the first person that would talk to me when I walked in the door, and they'd be the last person to talk to me when I left, and they'd be the first person to shoot up questions, and they were hard questions, and oftentimes they're not happy with the answers that are given. But now I kind of see it as an opportunity to maybe soften the way that they think about a food bank or a food pantry, and to kind of switch their point of view. So I kind of don't encourage hecklers, but I kind of almost look forward to them now because I feel like it's a great opportunity for me to change their point of view and maybe get them to think about something they hadn't before. You know, one of the big ones I get a lot with hecklers is, well, do you just give anybody food? You know, what kind of screening process do they go to? You know, I really get mad when I go in there and I see someone with a nice car, you know, pull up and they get food. And so oftentimes I'll switch that on them and I'll say, well, I know it's hard to think about sometimes, and sometimes it's hard not to judge a book by the cover, but that may not even be their car. That may be somebody's car that they they borrowed to come to the food pantry. And so I kind of switch that up on them so that maybe they can think about it from a different point of view. And sometimes that does soften their reaction and their response. So do expect them. Don't be afraid by them, but be prepared for them.